Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of round 3 of Tata Steel 2021. We have an unexpected leader in the Tata Steel tournament. Niels Grandelius from Sweden won his first 2 games. 3 players half a point behind him, Carlsen, Giri and Caruana. Many players on 1 point and 4 players at the bottom, Duda, Tari and Ferrugia with half a point out of 2 games, and Donchenko lost both his first 2 games. The pairing for round 3, Yesipenko, Vasila Graf, Grandelius, Hare Krishna, Caruana, Duda, Giri, Donchenko, Wojtaszek, Van Foreest, Carlsen against Tari, the Norwegian clash, and Ferrugia against Anton Gigaro. In this video we're going to look at the games of the leaders. I will present 4 games to you, and of course we're going to start with the tournament leader, Niels Grandelius against Penchala Hare Krishna. And here we see both players at the board. Let's get into the game. Grandelius opened with the e-pawn and we saw the French defense, d4, d5 and e5, the advanced French. The French is a very rare guest at the elite level and the advanced variation is even more rare. c5, c3, queen b6, knight f3 and bishop d7. Black is going to put his bishop on b5. And will swap off the light squared bishops, which is always black's Achilles heel in the French. And that's what happened in this game. Bishop e2, c takes d4, c takes d4, and there comes that bishop to b5. Grandelius castled and Hare Krishna took on e2. The drawback for black is that he has made 3 moves with that bishop, while white only has made 1, which puts black behind in development. As Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky explained in the live broadcast, I'm taking his comments for this video. Queen takes e2, knight c6 and knight c3. White does not have to be afraid of black taking on d4, winning a pawn, because after knight takes, there's queen b5 check. And that is a disaster for black. He is not developed and his king is exposed. Black is winning here. So after knight c3, Hare Krishna was not going to take that pawn. He develops with knight g to e7. Queen d3, now that pawn has to be protected. Rook c8, rook d1, h6, bishop d2, and don't think you can take the pawn on b2, because then there is, yes indeed, knight a4 and the black queen is trapped. So after bishop d2, knight g6 was played. h4 with the idea of h5 kicking that knight back. So quickly bishop b4 before the knight is kicked back to e7, and then that bishop would be stuck on f8 and we would have a traffic jam for black, as Grandmaster Naroditsky put it. Knight a4, queen c7, and there comes h5, knight kicked back to e7, and now on move 17 a very crucial moment. Here white played bishop d2 to f4, and that is not a good move. And we see black getting active play on the queen side. Hare Krishna took his chance. Queen a5, attacking the knight. b3, yes, that protects the knight, but it weakens the dark squares on the queen side. Black has very nice play there. He played b5, kicking the knight back. Knight b2, bishop a3, attacking the knight again. The queen has to protect the knight. And Hare Krishna castled. Rook a to b1 and rook c7. Hare Krishna patiently and precisely builds up his play on the queen side. And black is not getting anything going on the king side. Knight d3, getting that knight out of the doldrums on b2 and bring it into the game. Queen b6, b4, a5 from Hare Krishna. B takes a5 from Grandelius, knight takes, bishop c1, and the bishops get swapped, and also a pair of rooks comes off the board. And now knight c4. Hare Krishna said after the game that if white can manage to swap the a2 pawn for the b5 pawn, he will be fine. But black's pieces on the queen side are much better than white's pieces. The knight on f3 is stuck defending the pawn on d4, explained Hare Krishna. Knight b3 from Grandelius, rook a8, rook c1 and knight c6. Black's knights are much stronger than white's. g3, rook a3, king g2 and queen a7, putting pressure on the a pawn. Rook c2 to defend it and knight b4, and now this a2 pawn is doomed. Rook c3, there goes the pawn. Attacking the rook, rook d3, and now a nice little combination to swap a few pieces off the board and reach a winning endgame. Rook takes b3, white takes back, but then there is the knight fork winning the exchange back. Very nice play from Krishna. White has to save the queen, and black takes the exchange back. Queen takes, queen a4, you cannot swap those queens because then the a pawn will go through. So queen b1 and b5, b4 on move 38. The white knight is dominated by black's knight. The b pawn will march down the board and the white queen will not be able to stop it. A very clean and precise win from Krishna, and Grandelius came back down to earth after winning the first two games. And he must have been disappointed losing this game with white without a real fight. Now let's look how Caruana got on, half a point behind the leader before the round started. He had the white pieces against Jan Krzysztof Duda from Poland. A few pictures from the players at the board. And let's get into the game. e4 from Caruana. Duda said after the game that he had expected d2, d4 on the first move. So this move was a surprise for him. e5, knight f3, and Duda decided to go for the Petrov. He realized it was dangerous to go for that opening, as Caruana had prepared a lot of ideas in his opening for the World Championship match against Carlsen. But he thought, I'll still go for my beloved Petrov. Knight takes e5, d6, let's put the opening moves on the board. We've seen this before in this tournament. Bishop e7, bishop e3, knight d7, queen d2, black castled, and so did white, opposite castling on the board. Knight f6, bishop d3, c5, and now look at this move on move 11. Rook h2 g1 with a clear intention to play up the g-pawn. Caruana drops a bomb, was Grandmaster Naroditsky's comment here. Duda said after the game that he did not know this move, he had not seen it before. b5, and there goes that g-pawn. Bishop b7, attacking the unprotected knight on f3. Queen e2, c4, attacking the bishop, bishop f5. And if you play g6 here, that is not really attacking the bishop. The bishop will stay there. As soon as black takes, the g-file will open up, and then white will have a very strong attack. Duda decided not to play g6, he played rook e8. Knight d4, knight d5, and knight e6. This looks very spectacular, but it is not really. If black takes, white will win a piece back straight away. F takes e6, bishop takes e6 is a double attack. Check, and the knight is hanging, because it's attacked twice and only defended by the bishop. King h8 and bishop takes d5, white has won a pawn. So Duda did not take the knight, he played queen a5 and now queen f3, putting pressure on this knight on d5 with both rook and queen. And also white has some attacking ideas with queen h3. Bishop f6. Now black is threatening to take the knight, it's now hanging. And also both kings are weak in this position, and we have the tactical possibilities with the discovered attack of the bishop on b7 on the queen. But also this bishop is unprotected, so there are lots of tactical and strategical things going on here. It is a very complicated and rich game, and the commentators were already talking about this being the game of the tournament. g5 from Caruana, bishop takes c3, and if you recapture, there is queen a3 check, king d2, and queen takes c3 check, and black is winning here. So bishop takes c3 is not really a sacrifice. And look at this move from Caruana. Bishop takes h7 check. What a game this is. Duda took, and g6 to clear the g5 square for the knight. Duda took the pawn, knight g5 check, and king h8, which is better than king g8. After king g8 there is queen f7 check, king h8 and rook g4 with the threat of rook h4, and this wins for white. So Duda went to the correct square after knight g5 check, the h8 square. Bishop d4. Grandmaster Naroditsky said, finding this quiet move on the other side of the board speaks of this guy's genius. What would have happened after queen h3 check, king g8, queen h7 check, then there is king f8 and the king will escape to the queen side. So bishop d4 was Caruana's 22nd move. Duda took it, rook takes, knight f6, and that is attacking the queen, but that bishop on b7 is unprotected. So Caruana is regaining the sacrificed piece, the piece he sacrificed on h7. Rook a to b8, hitting the queen, and queen f7, threatening rook h4, which wins for white. Black has his own trumps, rook e1 check, and if you take that, then the queen recaptures with check, rook has to interpose, and queen takes f2 lets black's queen back into the game. So Caruana did not take the rook, he played the other rook back to d1 to shield the check. Rook takes g1, rook takes d1, and the other rook comes to e8, and now black has a mate threat. White should not fall asleep, don't play queen takes g6 because you will get checkmated in 2 moves like this. After rook e8, Caruana did not fall for that, he played knight e6 and that is threatening checkmate on g7. And rook g8 is not really a move, it loses to queen takes g6, white is winning here. So after knight e6 there is only one thing you can do, and that is sacrifice the exchange, queen takes and queen takes a2, and now we see Caruana make a move repetition to get closer to the time control, and then he is swapping the queens to get into a good endgame for white. Let's see how that happened. A move repetition and then queen a3 to swap the queens. Queen takes, b takes, king f7, and this is a bad endgame for black, but at least he has survived the onslaught and has reached an endgame. Both players only had a few minutes left at this stage, still 6 moves to go to the time control. King d2, a6, king e3, knight check, king d4 and knight e7. And now a mistake from Caruana on move 38. As indicated by Grandmaster Jan Smeets, he should have played a4 here. And then we have this line, knight c6 check, king d5, knight b4 check. With a fork, winning the c-pawn, but white doesn't have to be worried. King takes d6, knight takes c2, a takes b5, a takes b5, and the king attacks the pawns. Knight a3 and rook c1, and the knight is trapped, and this is winning for white. Nice variation. But after knight e7, in time trouble, Caruana did not find a4. He played rook e1, and this move is too slow, because now Duda could bring his king to the queen side. King e8, now a4, 1 move too late, king d7, a takes, rook g1 and king c6, and the king is now supporting the queenside pawns. The time control was reached, h4, knight f5 check, king c3, and there goes a pawn off the board. King b4, knight f3, black is very close to gaining a draw. White takes on g6, knight d4, attacking the c2 pawn, so c3, knight e2, there goes another pawn off the board, but knight f4 is a very strong move. With the idea of knight d5, winning the c3 pawn, and another idea is knight d3, also check, winning the f2 pawn. This game will end in a draw, king a5 from Caruana, knight e2, attacking the c-pawn, so the king hurried back, knight f4, king a5, we have a move repetition, and after 51, king b4, both players agreed to a draw. What a game this was! I only scratched the surface with this analysis. A lot of pages will be written on this game. A great attack from Fabiano Caruana, but one must say a wonderful defense from his opponent. And how did the world champion get on? He played against his compatriot Tari. They had played 2 classical games before in Norway Chess in October. Carlsen had won them both. A few pictures of the players at the board. Let's look at the game. Carlsen opened with the d-pawn, knight f6, c4, e6, and we have a queen's gambit declined. Knight c3 and c5, the Tarrasch defense. C takes d5 and e takes d5 is the old school move. For example, Kasparov used to play this way, but the modern way is to take on d4. Queen takes, e takes, e4, d takes, and on move 8 the queens are coming off the board. Peter Leko in the Chess24 broadcast called this the new Berlin, which is the opening in the e4, e5 range where the queens also come off the board very early. Is this the great equalizer for black in the d4 openings? He wondered. Knight g5, bishop e6, and you can regain the pawn with knight g2 takes e4, but after knight takes, knight c6, this is completely equal. So Carlsen played it differently. He took on e6 with check, f takes, black is a pawn up, but white will be able to regain the pawn. This pawn he will get back eventually. Bishop g5, knight c6, castling with check, king e8 and bishop b5. Carlsen has a slightly better endgame, and Grandmaster Naroditsky compared this to going to the dentist or having to get up very early in the morning. It's uncomfortable having a slightly worse endgame against the world champion. Rook c8, king b1 and bishop b4. And now Carlsen decides to regain the pawn. He took on f6 and then took on e4. f5, knight g5 and king e7. Black has 2 weak pawns, but the king is very close to defend them. a3, bishop a5 and f4, clamping down on the e5 square so that black will not be able to play e6, e5 himself. He played h6, knight f3, rook hd8. A pair of rooks get swapped. The other rook comes to d1, rook c7, knight e5 on that nice square, a6, bishop back to e2, bishop b6, a check, king e8 and bishop h5, setting up a discovered attack by playing away the knight. But Tari is rightly not afraid of it. There's nothing for the knight to attack. He played knight c6, g4, that pawn was taken, and rook d6. The g pawn is a sitting duck, it's not going anywhere, so Carlsen is going after the e6 pawn. Tari defends it, f5, king f6, and don't take that pawn on e6 because then there is king g5 and the bishop is trapped. Nice play from Tari. So after king f6, Carlsen took on e6 with the pawn, king g5, and this is not trapping the bishop because there's rook d5 check. King f6, attacking the e pawn again. Black's king is leading the charge, is being attacked and is attacking. Knight f4, defending the pawn, bishop e3, knight g2, and don't take the pawn now because then there is knight takes e3, very nice move. This knight is protecting the rook that was attacked by the king. Tari saw that, of course. He played bishop g5. Carlsen took on g4 and knight e5. Again, nice play from Tari. He's activating his minor pieces and is not worried that white has an extra pawn. This knight on g2 now looks like a very silly piece. It's dominated by the bishop. Bishop h3, h5, king a2, rook e7, knight back to e1, rerouting the knight, bishop f4 and knight f3. A nice way to swap a piece. Tari took that undefended knight on f3, but then there is rook f5 check, winning the piece back. King g6, Carlsen regains the piece, and there goes the h-pawn. Winning back the pawn. King b3, knight g4, and that piece also comes off the board. And this rook endgame is an easy draw. We have reached a time control. We're on move 43. Let's see the remaining moves of the game. And Carlsen and Tari go all the way to the end. we actually will see a stalemate, which is very nice, especially for novice players, that these two players play the game all the way till the end. King c7 on move 56, and black cannot make a move. The game is stalemate, so it is a draw. Great game from Tari, defending a slightly worse endgame against the world champion. He must have been delighted. The final game we're going to look at in this video is Giri against Donchenko. We'll go through that game very quickly. Giri also one of the players on a plus score after 2 rounds with 1.5 points. Giri was white, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and we have a Nimzo Indian on the board. Knight f3, castling, and bishop d2, a modest move intending to take on c3 with the bishop when black takes on c3. b6, e3, and black takes on c3, bishop takes, and knight e4, a typical Nimzo Indian idea to put that knight there. If you want to maintain the bishop pair, that is somewhat awkward, c5, and the bishop has to go to a3. That is not really great for white. So Giri played rook c1 instead. Bishop b7, bishop d3, d6, Giri castled, and black regained the bishop pair. Knight d7, d5, and don't think you can win a pawn with e takes, c takes, bishop takes, because then there is, yes, bishop takes, h7 check, wins the pawn back with interest. The queen is now attacking the bishop. So after d5, e5 was played, e4 and a5, preparing knight c5 without being bothered by b2, b4. Bishop c2, knight c5, g3 and c6, attacking the center. Giri decided to take on c6, bishop takes. This pawn on d6 is weak, but so is white's pawn on e4. Queen e2, queen e7, queen e3 and g6. Rook e1 and rook a2, e8. Black is clearly preparing f5. b3, king h8 and knight h4, stopping the f7, f5 push. And that's why black goes to b8 and is now trying to push b5 through. a3, preparing b4 to kick the knight away. The knight goes proactively to e6. b4, a takes, and the knight goes to d4. c5 was a nice square for the knight, and so is d4. Bishop back to d1, bishop a8, and knight f3, challenging the dominating knight on d4. Donchenko retreated. Rook a3, f5, and e takes. Now black would love to take back with the g-pawn, but that is a blunder because of knight takes e5, d takes e5, and queen takes e5 check. And also attacking this knight with 2 pieces. With gaining the piece because rook f6 to protect the knight is not possible because then that rook on b8 is hanging. So after e takes f5, you have to take back with the rook. That's what Donchenko did. Knight d2, rook f7, f4, knight d4, black doesn't have any problems here. F takes, d takes, queen takes, rook takes, and knight c6, winning the pawn back because of that fork. Rook e1, knight takes b4, knight f3, another swap, another number of pieces comes off the board, b5. These pawns get swapped, and this is simply drawn endgame. Great play from Donchenko with the black pieces after losing his first 2 games. The last moves were made, the time control was reached. This is move 40. Knight a6, rook c1, and the last move of the game, rook f7. A comfortable draw with black for Donchenko, recovering very well after his very poor start of this tournament. Let's go to the results of round 3. We saw a draw in Esipenko against Vache Lagrave. We saw Grandelius Krishna, we saw Caruana Duda, Giri Donchenko, and Wojtaszek van Foreys played a draw against each other. We saw Carlsen Tari, and Ferrugia won his first game in this tournament by beating Anton Guijaro. These are the standings after the third round. We have now 5 leaders. Krishna, Carlsen, Giri, Caruana and Grandelius lead the 83rd Tata Steel tournament. We also have 5 players on 50%, 3 players on -1, and Alexander Donchenko will feel a bit better. He is now on the scoreboard. Round 4 will be played on Tuesday the 19th of January and we'll see Vasila Graaf against Anton Gijaro, Tari Feruja, Van Foreest against Carlsen, Donchenko Wojtasek, Duda Giri, Krishna Caruana, that is a clash between 2 leaders, and Yesipenko against Grandelius. I will be here after the round to tell you what happens. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.